Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on the Masechtas Yevamot daf Mem Ches. We are going to begin on the bottom of Mem Zayin Amud Beis, about 6 lines from the bottom, first wide line. Echad ger ve'echad eved meshucher. So we were learning in the previous daf the dinim of gerus, of conversion. And when it comes to the gerus of an eved meshucher, of a freed slave, it requires tefillah, and it must be done, this immersion, l'shem avdos. And now once that takes place, he's now chayiv in mitzvos, just like a woman, chayiv mitzvos keisha. Then we do another tefillah, l'shem cherus, to be able to free him. And only at that moment can he marry a Bas Yisrael. That is the process. So on this, kasak l'daito chokabul avol mitzvos. So we think that at the time in which a person goes to do tefillah, whether it's a ger or an eved meshucher, it's necessary that he has to actually be makabel mitzvos. As Rashi says, the high the akish shichur shel eved legerus, the connection. So he has to actually have some acknowledgement, first of all, telling him about the mitzvos that he has to do, etc. Or minhu, the only time there's a requirement of tzarech kabel is dafka when it comes to a ger. But eved meshucher ain't tzarech kabel. But an eved meshucher doesn't have to. He can just do tefillah, and that he doesn't have to be makabel mitzvah. So Rav Sheshes Lokasha Rav Shimon ben Eliezer Harabanan. It's actually a machlokis whether or not at the time of his immersion, whether or not when he's toivel l'shem avdos, whether he's necessary for him to actually be makabel mitzvos. So it's a machlokis, the sanya. As we learned by the Yefas Toar, it says as follows: Uvachaso es avihav es imo. So that this woman who was in captivity, who you took in the midst of war, she cries for her father and mother. So b'medibor murim shul kibuleha. So the only time we say that this process takes place, that you have to wait, is if she's not makabel upon herself the mitzvos. Avol kibuleha matbila umuter bo miyad. If Shitaku would be makabel, just like this eved meshucher, so then you would be able to do tefillah right away. Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer omer afal bishlu kibuleha kaife umatbil l'shem shivchus. No, even if she's not makabel, it doesn't make any difference. You don't have to be makabel. She doesn't have to be makabel. You can still force her to be toivel, immerse herself with shem shivchus, and then once she becomes a shivcha, what you could do then is v'chayzer umatbil l'shem shichur. You could then free her, umishachra, and when she becomes free, umuter bo miyad. As we said, once you become freed, then you're mutter to a Bas Yisrael, and she herself would be able to marry into Klal Yisrael. So this is an interesting approach, that you could have her do tefillah as it become an eved al korchach, even according to the shita of the Rabbanan, it's not necessary for there to be kabbalas mitzvos, and therefore afterwards she could be doing a second tefillah with shem shichurs, and that's how you could take her right away. So even if she's not makabel mitzvos, this Yefas Toar. According to the other sheet, the fact that he doesn't give this eitzah, he says no, she actually has to. You have to wait if she's not makabel. So therefore, it must be that kabbalah is necessary, and you can't do when it comes to avdos, to an eved meshucher, it's necessary for them to be makabel, and you can't do this bal korchach. It won't work. As we continue, Mem Chasam Aleph, Muter bo miyad, says Rashi, Almol Rav Shimon eved ein tzarich l'kabel b'shas tefillah shichur. It must be that, according to the other opinion, then according to this, that it's not necessary to be makabel. Or Rabbanan doy have it kanta b'hachi savar kabel. The Rabbanan who don't come up with this takana must be holds that you do need to be makabel. So we see that's goof of the machlokas. Some Rabbi Maitam and Rav Shimon ben Eliezer. So I talk it as Rav Shimon ben Eliezer say the statement, as we just established, this kula, which apparently means that it's not necessary for a person to be makabel shem gerus when it comes to l'kabel mitzvahs, rather when you're talking about an eved. So why? Because the chsiv kol eved ish miknas kasef, eved ish v'lo eved isha. So the Gemara asks this question: when it comes to the carbon pesach, so there's a general din by carbon pesach that only after you did the bris meal on all of your avadim kananim, then and only then can you actually eat from the carbon pesach. So the pasuk says kol eved ish miknas kasef, that this requirement is upon every single eved that you purchased. So the question is, why say ish? Is it eved ish or eved isha? That would be an impossible diak to make because you shouldn't be machalik. Elo, what is the drasha? Eved ish atamoyel bal karchai, that you actually are able to circumcise and do mila bal karchai on this eved ish. Yatamol ben ish bal karchai. You're only allowed to do this to an eved, because an eved meshochar, an eved l'shem abdus, again, it will work even if it's against his will, which means he does not have to be makabel b'shas tfilos shichur. He doesn't. That's not necessary, and that's how we see from here. That's only by him. Ben ish bal karchai. When it comes to someone who's a free person and he wants to have bris milah, no. But when it comes to an eved, that you are able to do. Says Rashi, this is referring to an eved that you purchased from an avik chabim. You're allowed to circumcise him even against your will. Skimming through lines of Rashi, the fact that it's mashman, it says you can do it bal karchai, so therefore it's clear that he doesn't have to be makabel. Skipping a few more lines into Rashi, Eved shehu ish, alpha pi shehu gadoil, u ben das, u malta oiso bal karcha, v'yata moil ben shehu ish ger, habolaskayer, in lekoyach lomo b'noi hagadol bal karchai. Okay, fine. So v'rabbanan omer ula kashim shiyata moil ben ish bal karchai. No, just like you can't be moil a free person against his will, he has to be makabel the mitzvahs. Kachiyata moil eved ish bal karcho. He says no, there's no difference. Even when it comes to an eved, you also have to be makabel the mitzvahs. So v'el haksiv kol eved ish. So what's the drasha? Hu meboil el l'shmol. The Amar Shmuel. Hamavkir avdoi yatzol cherus. That when you free your slave, that slave now goes free. And the chiddush is v'intzach get shichur, that you do not need to produce a document or to create a document of emancipation. He's free anyway. Shnemar kol eved ish miknas kasef. So eved ish, well, eved isha, again, obviously it's not coming to infer a man versus a woman. El eved sheish lo rishus rabo of kori eved. Who's considered an eved? Only someone who you have some power and dominion over. However, if you don't have power over him because you freed him, so he's no longer called your eved, which means they do not need a star shechor. Okay. So we're saying that there's a machlokus, as we went out from Yifas Toar, as whether she has to wait for she has to wait for a certain period of time and cry, and that's only because she was a makabel mitzvah. So if she was makabel, then it's okay. And then Rabbi Shimon Eliezer comes up with this idea of make her into an eved, and the Rabbanan don't make that concept because, again, it's totally the machlokus whether you could be koife. So you can't be koife according to the Rabbanan and Yafas Toar. So therefore, we learn out from just like from that. So too when it comes to Eved Meshochar. So Gemara says 1 second. Maybe the only reason why we say this din that you can't just do this process is by Yafas Toar de l'shaych b'mitzvos, because she's not shaykh to mitzvos that she should be makabel. Eved the shaykh b'mitzvos hachanam defilu Rabbanan moide. Maybe the Rabbanan Taka would be agreeing that you do not need to be makabel in that situation comes to an eved. The sanya echad ger v'echad lo yikech eved min ha'oivik hachavim. Whether we're talking about a ger, echad ger, or one who purchases an eved from an oivik hachavim, sarach l'kabel. In those situations, they need to be makabel the mitzvos. Ha'lo yikech miYisrael, which is a diak is what? That if you purchase an eved from a yid, ain't sarach l'kabel. So mani, who's that like? Rav Shimon ben Elazar. He says that you don't need to be makabel when it comes to even purchasing an eved from one of the chachamim. So it's certainly not like him because he doesn't require it even from an of chachamim. And he's saying that being mechalak between an Av Kachavim and Yisrael. Allah Rabbanah. The fact is, it must be the Rabbanah. Shema Minah L'Koich Min Av Kachavim Tzarech L'Kabel. The only time is when you purchase from an Av Kachavim. L'Koich Min Yisrael Ein Tzarech L'Kabel. However, when you purchase from Yisrael, maybe in that situation the Eved does not need to be Makabel. Rather, you can just simply do the Tefillah even without Kabbal's mitzvos when it comes to Eved. So you can't necessarily learn out from the case of Yefas Toyar, because by Yefas Toyar, it's from an Av Kachavim. So when it comes to an Av Kachavim, maybe that's where the Rabbanan say that's Tzarech Kabel. However, when it comes to an Eved Meshuchar, so you purchase the Eved, you purchase the Eved from a Yisrael, so then even they would agree you don't have to be Makabel. So the question is, what is the fact that we can compare these two? Which is mashma, by both of them, you do need to be Makabel. It just means in Tefillah, Tanya, says Rashi, that when it comes not just to conversion, but also comes to an Eved, you need to immerse. However, when it comes to Kabbalah, that's only by a ger. However, it's not necessary when it comes to an Eved who wishes to become Meshuchah, to become freed. So therefore, again, so maybe the machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rav Shimon Eliezer is dark in a situation where we're talking about like Yefas Toar, where you're getting from an Av Kachavim, whether or not she has to be Makabel. However, in a situation where it's from a Yisrael, then in that situation, they all hold in Tzarech L'Kabel. The fact that we compare him to a ger is just that he requires Tefillah. Okay, let's look at question 11. Eved HaMeshuchar B'ma Nichnas L'Klal Yisrael. So an Eved Meshuchar, how does he enter into Klal Yisrael? So we say, B'Tefillah L'Shem Shechor. All he needs is to go into the mikvah, and it has to be L'Shem Shechor, for the sake of becoming free. But it's not necessary to have the extra element of Kabbalah mitzvos. See if there's any other questions. Okay. Fine. So the Gemara continues and says, Tan Rabbanan, the Gilcha es Roisha. So one thing she does is she has to shave her hair, but he also says she has to do something to her nails. So Belezer Omer Takoitz, Rabbi Akiva Omer Tagdil. So it's actually machlokus. What does it mean? Does she let her nails grow, or does she cut them? So Omer Rabbi Lezer Nemra Asiya Barosh and Nemra Asiya B'Tzipranayim. It mentions this connection to the hair. So Malahol and Havara, just like when it comes to the hair, we know it's cutting the hair. Afkan Havara means she has to cut her nails. Rabbi Akiva Omer Nemra Asiya Barosh and Nemra Asiya B'Tzipranayim. Malahol and Nivol, Afkan Nivol. So when it comes to cutting the hair, that's manuval for a woman for her hair to be cut. And therefore we also want to do something manuval, which is letting her nails grow long. Uraya Ladiri Rabbi Eliezer, and I have a proof to support the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer that says takoitz, that the nails should be cut. It says in Sefer Shmuel, Umipi Boishas ben Shoel, regarding Mipi Boishas, the son of Shaul, Yored Likras HaMelech, he went to visit the king, Lo Asa Raglov, Lo Asa Safamoy. So it says that he did not have his Raglov, says Rashi, Lo Katzatzi Parnei Raglov, he didn't cut his toenails, Lo Asa Safamoy. And says Rashi, Lo Gileach Sar Safamoy, he didn't shave like his mustache or his beard. So what do we see? Mayasiya Havara. It's mashma that it must be an element of removing. The fact that they're connected, it must be that that's what is done also by the Yefas Toar. She definitely has her hair cut, because she also cuts her nails. So she cries for her father and for her mother as we continue to Mem Chesed Beis. So what exactly is that referring to? Who is this referring to? So Rabbi Lezer Omer Avi Mamish. Avi Ima is Ima Mamish. It means that she cries the fact that she's leaving her parents. Rabbi Akiva Omer Avi Ima Zu Avodas Kachavim. This is actually a soft way of speaking about idol worship. V'cheinu oimer, as the pasuk says in Yirmiyah, oimrim la'etz, that we say regarding this wood, avi ata, you are like my dad. Yerech yomim, so what does it mean that she was crying for Yerech yomim? So Yerech shloshim yoim, it's 30 days. So Shimon Elazar oimer tishim yoim, it's actually 90 days. Why 90? Because Yerech is shloshim, yomim is shloshim. It says Yerech, we'll call that 30, a month. Yomim will be another 30. V'acher kain shloshim, and then there'll be another shloshim. So 90 total. So Masker Ravina, maybe Yerech shloshim, maybe Yerech is 30, Yomim shloshim, v'achach kihani. And maybe the next one is like those, which means it should be not just another a total of just another 30, maybe it should be another 60, total of 120. Kasha. Tanabam. Mikayomin avadim shenim oilin. Diva Rabbi Shmuel. According to the sheet of Rabbi Shmuel, he holds that you're allowed to keep an eved even if he does not have bris milah. You're allowed to have him; it's not a problem. On this, Rabbi Kiva Omer ein mekayamin. No, if you have such an eved and he's not going to have his bris milah, which is necessary, so you can't keep him as your slave. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, how are you? Omer v'nafesh ben amasecha ben amoscha. That says. Nafesh ben Amascha, says Rashi, v'hai be'eved orel ksiv. This is referring to an eved who did not have a bris milah. So l'chayra, it's mashma that you could keep someone like this. So how is it shaykh to tell me, Rabbi Akiva, that you can't keep him? So malay no bloikech eved ben hashmashay, so hisbik l'moyel hakasam adaver. This is not a normal situation. It's where you purchased him right before Shabbos, and therefore you weren't able to be moyelim on that Shabbos. So it's referring to v'nafesh ben amasacha is again referring to an eved who you purchased who has not had the chance to have bris milah. It doesn't mean that you can keep him forever that way, but it just means that at least for this Shabbos. The kuli yalmam is everyone agrees that v'nafesh ben amasacha be'eved oroksiv. For some reason, those words clearly indicate it's referring to someone who has not had a bris. So my mashma desani v'nafesh ben amascha be'eved oro kas b'daber. That's what it's referring to. Ata oimer be'eved oro eno el be'eved mohol. Maybe the pasuk is referring to an eved who actually had bris milah. Because she oimer l'man yanuach avdacha ve'amasacha kamaycha har eved mohil omar. The pasuk says already in Devarim, referring to the resting of your eved and your maidservant, kamoicha, just like you. L'chayr, that's referring to someone who's moil like you. So these are like extra words. So it must be coming to even the rabbos that the shaykh that you can have an eved oral. Either that you're just allowed to be mekayim him for an extended period of time like that, or it's because you purchased him right before Shabbos. But ger, and when it says in the pasuk about the convert, zeger taishav. This is referring to a ger taishav. What's a ger taishav? Says Rashi, shekibul of shul avad avodas kachavim. A ger taishav does accept certain mitzvos that they're not going to worship idols, but oichel nevelos, and he eats nevelos. He's here kasav al Shabbos that we actually mazir him regarding Shabbos. The machal es a Shabbos ka'ovid avodas kachavim. So it's referring to a ger taishav. Maybe it's talking about someone who's mamish completely converted to Judaism. Because so we're including the ger taishav as well. So if a person purchases an eved from a non-Jew, which we said in that situation, just like the Ifas Torah is the machlokas, exactly whether at the Makabel, and let's say the eved doesn't want to have the circumcision, she says they can at least keep him for 12 months. Try to convince him during that time. Let's say it still hasn't happened. Then you can go and you can sell him back to another chachamim. So again, you're not allowed to sell an eved back to another chachamim, stop. But in a situation where he refuses to do bris milah, so then we allow you to do so after 12 months. So Amru Rabban Kamid Rapapa, come on, who's this like to Rabbi Kiva? To Rabbi Kiva, in Mekayamin. Now in Mekayamin is mashma even 1 day is aser. Not that you should hold on to him for 12 months. So Amru Rapapa, Filatim Rabbi Kiva. How could it be like Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva is not mashma. You can keep him for 12 months. So hanimili heichadol paskel milse. One is a situation where he never stopped his previous lifestyle. However, if he did stop his previous lifestyle, then we'll say he stopped. What does that mean? It says Rashi. That's when he says, Rabbi Akiva holds, that you can't keep him at all, if he has no interest at all. If he actually stipulated, and he says, Rashi says, when you purchased him, when his fayis lisgayer, and he was convinced to convert, and he retracted, so maybe in that case we'll give him some time to come back to his original thoughts. Which Nachrina says Rashi, when do you not keep him? However, skipping a couple lines, okay. Amr Rav Kahana, Amrisa Lishmaisa Kameda Rav Zvid Ben Harda. Amrle Ihachi, if that's the case, Ki Amr Rabbi Akiva. So when Rabbi Akiva said, this time when you are allowed to keep him is davka in the situation, Ben Shmashos, right before Shabbos, so Lishni Leha, he could have given this answer. In other words, if in fact he's making a distinction, how is it shak to be able to keep an Eved? It is shak to keep him even for 12 months, provided that he was Tomsky Lamilse. So if that's the case, so why do we mention this case of Shabbos? So Chada Mitrei Tami Kaimer. Actually, it's one of two. He could have said either answer, but the reality is Rabbi Akiva holds in general you can't keep him. However, if you purchase him right before Shabbos, you can keep him that Shabbos because you had no time to do the meal. Alternatively, if he was willing to do so and then for whatever reason he changed his mind after the Lakicha, so then you have 12 months for him to go back to his original thoughts before selling him back to an Ovid Kachavim. Shalach Rabin Mishmei Rabbi Eloi v'chol Rabboisa Yameli Mishmoi Ezu Eved Orel Shemoto Lekamo. What is an example of an Eved who does not have bris milah that you can still keep? This is the person who purchased him. He purchased him on condition not to do milah. He did this almanah shaloy l'moyloi. Amar Rabbanan Kamed Rapapa command look Rabbi Akiva. Do Rabbi Akiva ha'erman makayamin. Rabbi Akiva says you can't keep someone like that, so it wouldn't make any difference whether you purchased them almanas shelo l'moila. You wouldn't be able to. Samar Papa, the field table Rabbi Akiva. Hanimil heicha delo asni behedya. The only time that you can't keep him if a condition wasn't made explicitly. But if a condition was made, a condition is made, and therefore you can keep it. That when it was the situation where you can keep him is that you purchased him right before Shabbos. Mention that case. There's more than one answer. We also mentioned that what happens if he, at the time of the Lakicha, was willing to become an Eved and to also to be Makabel and to do bris milah, and then afterwards he changed his mind. So he was Pascal Milse. Again, there's really three different answers, but those are a couple. You can accept any of those answers to answer the question of the din of Rabbi Akiva. Question 12. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Shein Mekayam an Eved Shlo Moil. You're not allowed to keep an Eved that did not have bris milah. Rabbi Shimon Levi Omer, the Megaglon Imoi Yud Beis Chodesh. You can wait 12 months with this guy. Rabbi Gemara Delo Pligi, Had the Pascal Milse. Mehem Beis Pirushim Barashi Babir Tirat Gemara. So what are the two answers in Rashi which explains this, which we already said inside, but let's see how Dirshu writes it out. One shot is like this. Imo pasuk migiyusai. If he never removed himself from his original status of being not Jewish and all of its trappings, lo kibulav lisgayer, he never accepts, I'm never going to convert, in makayam, you cannot keep him. If he was makabel, and let's say he changed his mind, but at least he was makabel, then we get to keep him. Alternatively, Rashi said, im pasuk imo, if let's say he made the stipulation, Dirmale Hareini Megagal Imcha, Mutter, V'im lo pasuk imo elastama osol kaimo. So if you just stam said nothing, then you cannot keep him. However, you would not be able to, because you didn't make any stipulation. However, if you did make a stipulation and say, I'm going to keep you for 12 months, and if you do not do a bris milah within those 12 months, I'm going to end up selling you, so then you're able to actually keep him. So if you make, the point, Pashut is, if you, when you, at the time of the mechira, you make the stipulation, I'm going to only wait for 12 months, then you can wait for 12 months. If you didn't say anything, you can't hold on to him at all. Okay. Back in the Gemara. Yosef Rav Chanina bar Papi v'Rav Ami v'Rav Yitzchak Nafcha Ikulu de Rav Yitzchak Nafcha the Yasvi Karmer, they're sitting and talking about the following. Ir Achas Haisa be'Eretz Yisrael. There was a city in Eretz Yisrael, V'Ratzel Avadeha Lamuyel, and the servants over there didn't want to do bris milah. The Gilgulim Mahenad Shnei Masar Chodesh. So we waited 12 months, like we mentioned. The Chazru, and they changed their mind. Umachrum Avi Kachavim, and we sold them to Avi Kachavim. So come on, who's that like? Ki Haitan, the sign Yokech Eved min Avi Kachavim. If you purchased an Eved from an Avi Kachavim, V'lo Ratzel Lamoil, and he didn't want to do the milah, so Megagli Moed Shnei Masar Chodesh Lo Moil. If let's say he didn't do it after the 12 months, then you can sell him. Some back. Or Shimon Elazar Omer, Ein Mashin Oiso be'Eretz Yisrael. We do not keep him in Eretz Yisrael at all. The Nehesed Taurus, says Rashi, Shematami es Hatrumos. This person, until he did milah, is still considered to be an Avi Kachavim. And it says Rashi, Avi Kachavim Gazul of Shehitame Kazav B'chol Devarov. That the din is that he has the din of a zav. And therefore, because of Hefsed Taharos, we don't want to keep this person around in Eretz Yisrael. We're not going to let him just walk around as your Eved without having done bris milah. We're not going to give him that 12-month time span, because during that process, it's possible he's going to end up causing a lot of making things tameh. For Shimon Elazar Omer, Ein Mashin Oiso be'Eretz Yisrael they have said Taharos. Also, Uve'ir Hasmuch Laspar. We're also not going to keep this Eved and let him wait while he is considering, maybe I'll convert, maybe I won't, in a city which is by the border. In Mashin Oiso Kol Iker. Uve'ir Has, they have Taharos. Period. Uve'ir Hasmuch Lasafar, Ein Mashin Oiso Kol Iker. Shem Yishma Dover, maybe he'll hear something, and he'll end up saying something to his friends. In other words, maybe the reason why he is in his situation is because he really is like a spy. He actually has no interest in converting. He has no interest in being an Eved and having bris milah. And therefore, because of that, we don't want him, even for a split second, if he's unwilling to do it, it may show his true colors. And a border city is a very vulnerable and dangerous place. If there's any easy ways to be able to infiltrate, it could cause major problems. Tanya, Rabbi Chanani ben Oisha, Rabbi Gamliel Oimer, Nemnei Gerim Bezman Hazeh Meunin v'Yisurin Boin Land. Why do converts nowadays have afflictions and problems? Neishlo Kimu Sheva Mitzvos B'nei Noach. Because they're not Mekayim the 7 mitzvos. What does that mean? It says Rashi, Shelo Kimu Zay mitzvos, Ba'oidin Ova Kachavim. While they were non-Jews, V'ad Hashed until now, Lo Ipari Minahu, they weren't paid back for their punishments. The Piranyos Genuzalahen, Lo Asad Lovo, that their punishments would be for the future. Avol Kishis Gairin, once they converted, Nifrain Mian Kedei Lomarik Chayvasan. Hashem punishes them here in this world, which actually is a good thing. So therefore, since before they were Jewish, they weren't Mekayim the Sheva Mitzvos, so therefore for that reason, they're punished as soon as they converted. That's impossible, because since he's like a newborn person, so he should not be held accountable and responsible for any of his past doings. He's considered like a completely new human being. So why sometimes we see a ger has difficulties. Because they're not particular in doing mitzvos. They may not have necessarily converted for the right reasons. The reason is because they only serve Hashem out of fear and not out of love. And the higher level is for a person to serve Hashem out of love. It's because they delayed in coming to serve Hashem. So what is the pasuk to support this? The pasuk says, Yishalem Hashem pa'olech, Hashem will pay back his workers, that he maschortech shleima me'im Hashem al keisah asher basal laxos v'goymer. So it says Rashi, Shimi harta v'lo icharta. Okay, so we're going to stop there. Let's see a couple of questions. TA 1. V'nafesh ben amascha be'eved oral kos medaber. Heich mishkachs le'eved oral mandi omer ein mekayamin. So how's it shaykh that if you hold ein mekayamin, so how is it possible that you could still hold on to such an eved? So he said, either we're talking about a case of loikeach eved ben hashmashos, so he had no time. Oh, we're talking about, it asks for how many answers? Right, it's 3. Or it's talking about Paskil Milsei, namely that he was willing to change, right? He ended up saying, I will stop from my original ways, and then he changed his mind. And the third answer is Asni Behedya, where you made a stipulation, where you explicitly said that I'm purchasing this person, Almanas Shalol Moiloi, not to do the Milah. So in that situation, that's where we say that even if you hold, you can't be Mekayim such an Eved, but nonetheless will allow it in that circumstance. TB 3. Ksivu sasak malacha tavincha v'itecha avdacha v'mascha v'gercha shebeshrecha. Why do you need this extra pasuk? So this is coming to Pasha tell you it's talking about either an Eved Oral or a Ger. It's talking about an Eved Oral, and also it's coming to include a Ger Toishav. Adkan.